Everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The ceremony is about to begin. Accelerationist Freeze of Nick Fuentes, Part 1. The Ruined Industrial Imaginary on Tariffs. Policy without form and the destruction of legitimate ideas. Sometimes nothing is better than something. Industrial policy is not a slogan. It is a total transformation. Unpredictability is the enemy of investment. Legitimate intuition. There exists a legitimate and historical grounded intuition that an economy cannot subsist indefinitely on abstraction, mediation, and symbolic labor alone. An information economy produces coordination, optimization, and velocity, but it does not by itself produce material sovereignty, strategic redundancy, or embodied skill. When too many citizens are relegated to call centers, spreadsheets, retail churn, and logistical abstractions, the polity hollows out its capacity to make, repair, and endure. Manufacturing is not merely an economic sector, but a civilizational discipline. It binds labor to material reality, ties education to process, and anchors national security in supply chains that cannot be conjured instantly by markets in moments of crisis. The factory, the mill, and the yard are not nostalgic symbols. They are infrastructural commitments that stabilize wages, skills, and strategic autonomy. The intuition that productive labor is better work is not a moral judgment, but a structural observation. Industrial employment scales competence, distributes tacit knowledge, and generates multiplier effects that retail and speculative finance cannot reproduce. This intuition has been shared across ideological lines for decades and cannot be dismissed as mere romanticism. Policy versus performance. Industrial policy is not reducible to tariffs. Tariffs are instruments, not strategies. Without subsidies, workforce development, capital planning, and sector-specific roadmaps, tariffs function as taxes without direction. They collect revenue but do not generate capacity, and they punish complexity rather than cultivating it. A serious industrial transformation requires coherence across time. Semiconductor fabrications, advanced manufacturing, and complex assembly demand decades of stable expectations, not months of improvisation. When tariff regimes change weekly or quarterly, capital rationally freezes. Investors do not oppose national projects, they oppose uncertainty. Policies that confuses deal-making with governance mistake leverage for leadership. Negotiation theatrics makes extract short-term concessions, but they cannot substitute for institutional design. Industrial ecosystems are not bargains into existence. They are built through sustained coordination between state, labor, capital, and education. Axioms of complexity and misapplied simplicity. And all goods are structurally equivalent. A couch assembled for a small number of inputs is not analogous to a car, a computer, or a microchip composed of thousands of interdependent components. Tariffing each input in a complex supply chain compounds friction rather than incentivizes relocation. Complex manufacturing favors environments of predictability, specialization, and scale. Attempting to force such systems into existence through blunt tariffs, misunderstanding how modern production operates. In many cases, it is more rational to tariff a finished good once than to penalize every intermediate step in its creation. Policy that ignores production topology, mistakes moral intention for technical adequacy. Good intentions do not collapse logistical realities without a granular understanding of how industries actually function. Protectionism becomes performative rather than productive. Nostalgia without architecture. A vision of restored manufacturing rooted in childhood memory, coal miners, unions, factories humming as symbols rather than systems, cannot substitute for contemporary industrial architecture. The past does not return intact. It must be re-engineered under present conditions of automation, global supply chains, and technological specialization. To desire manufacturing without designing education is incoherent. A high school graduate cannot walk untrained into a semiconductor fabrication store. Warehouse. Industrial revival requires massive reinvestments in vocational pipelines, technical institutes, and long-term skill formation. Without this, rhetorical collapses into fantasy. Nostalgia becomes destructive when it blocks institutional learning. A nation cannot will itself into productivity by invoking images of former greatness or refusing the complexity such greatness now entails. Axioms of ruination by incompetence. Bad execution does more than fail. It poisons the idea it claims to represent. When a legitimate industrial critique is enacted incompetently, it discredits itself for a generation. Future advocates inherit skepticism, not sympathy. The danger is not merely economic inefficiency, but ideological spoilage. A failed attempt at protectionism convinced observers that all alternatives to neoliberal globalization are inherently chaotic, even when the failure lies in governance, not principle. In this sense, incompetence is worse than inaction. Inaction preserves the possibility of future reform. Disorderly action forecloses it by exhausting public trust and political patience. Something versus nothing. The assumption that any action is better than none is neither intuitive nor logical. Systems can be damaged by premature incoherence, intervention more severely than by delay. Sometimes restraint preserves optionality, while action destroys it. Transformation of an economy from finance-dominated abstraction to productive materiality is not incremental tinkering. It is a wholesale restructuring involving tariffs, subsidies, education, infrastructure, and temporal commitment. Partial gestures create friction without momentum. When policy becomes a box-checking exercise aimed at approval ratings rather than structural change, it generates the worst of both worlds: higher prices, lower investments, and no capacity gains. Precarious present, an economy propped up by speculative booms, whether in technology or artificial intelligence, cannot indefinitely compensate for industrial decline. When asset bubbles deflate, the absence of productive depth becomes immediately visible. If prices rise while manufacturing capacities continue to erode, public resentment will not distinguish between bad execution and bad ideas. The entire industrial project risks being remembered as a failed experiment rather than a missed opportunity. This is the tragedy of misgoverned reform. It converts sympathy into cynicism and foresight into regret. The sad outcome It is generally sad when a serious concern is ruined by unserious policy. The loss is not partisan, but civilizational. A society that cannot even attempt self-correction competently becomes trapped between stagnation and spectacle. The failure here is not merely Trump's, but institutional. The substitution of personal deal-making for technocratic design, of rhetoric for architecture, and of immediacy for duration. What remains is a cautionary axiom: legitimate ideas demand legitimate execution, as they will be remembered not as unrealized futures, but as warnings against ever trying again. The ruined dream and the cycle of return on scapegoating, failed transformation, and the gravity of normality. It would have been better if we had never tried. When a project fails, the idea itself is put on trial. People like the way things are more than they admit. Scapegoating in the aftermath. When an ambitious project collapses, is rarely remembered as a failure of execution. It is remembered as proof that the underlying idea was illegitimate. Policy disasters retroactively rewrite intellectual history, converting contingent mistakes into permanent warnings. The language of blame compresses complexity into a single verdict. We tried that, and it wrecked everything. In this way, failure does not merely end on experiment, it closes an avenue. A badly executed transformation becomes a prophylactic against future attempts. Its name invokes whenever reform reappears. What follows is not reflection but foreclosure, a refusal to distinguish between doing something wrongly and the impossibility of doing it well. Thus, paradoxically, inaction can preserve hope, while action can destroy it. An unrealized idea remains speculative, flexible, and redeemable. An implemented and failed one hardens into dogma against itself. The ship that takes everyone down. When a political figure comes to symbolize an entire ideological constellation, failure becomes collective. Tariffs, isolationisms, nativisms, and America First cease to be discrete propositions and become fused into a single vessel. If it sinks, all aboard are blamed, regardless of dissent, nuance, or prior skepticism. This is the danger of personalization in politics. One man's incompetence is transmuted into an indictment of every adjacent idea. The wreckage does not discriminate between serious critique of neoliberalism and theatrical improvisation masquerading as reform. The result is not merely defeat, but a re-legitimization of the center. Collapse at the extremes drives exhausted publics back towards managerial liberalism, technocratic moderation, and the promise of sanity, even when those regimes produce the original discontent. Cyclical exhaustion. Modern politics increasingly resembles a cycle of indulgence and regret. Voters periodically elect disruption to get it out of their system, only to recoil from the mess it creates and retreats to normalcy. Disruption becomes a purge rather than a project. Earth cycle deepens fatigue. Each cycle deepens fatigue. The electorate oscillates between rebellion and restoration, not because either satisfies, but because both exhaust. Over time, the appetite for genuine transformation is replaced by a desire for quiet competence. What dies in this oscillation is continuity, not long-term vision survives. No long-term vision survives repeated abandonment, and no reform matures before it is repudiated. The destroyed dream. Some dreams are more powerful, unfulfilled. The Soviet Union did not merely fail to realize communism, it damaged the plausibility of communist imagination itself. The existence of the regime transformed an abstract idea into a concrete disappointment. In this case, in this sense, realization can be more destructive than failure. An idea enacted poorly loses its utopian surplus. It becomes ordinary, compromised, and bureaucratic. The dream collapses into administration. This is the cruel irony of transformative politics. Success risks banality, while failure risks permanent delegitimization. The space between aspiration and execution is narrow and unforgiving. Fighting gravity. Many radical projects demand resistance to deep structural currents: modernity, pluralism, mobility, technological acceleration. Proposals to retreat into racial homogeneity, ancestral diets, religious primitivism, or sealed communities require immense and continuous effort against social gravity. Such efforts are not merely politically difficult, they are existentially exhausting. They ask individuals to live against convenience, diversity, and curiosity. What begins as conviction often collapses into boredom. Experiments in withdrawal repeatedly reveal this truth. The human desire for density, novelty, and connection overwhelms ideological purity. The commune empties, the phone reappears, the off-grid fantasy dissolves into nostalgia for the city. Lived preference. People complain incessantly about the modern life while continuously choosing it. Their behavior contradicts their rhetoric. Diversity, simulation, friction, and abundance are not merely tolerated, they are preferred. Political projects that ignore these reveal preference, mistake dissatisfaction for desire. Wanting change is not the same as wanting that change, nor wanting it at the cost it would require. This is why many radical programs fail at the level of everyday life. They underestimate how much people already enjoy the world they claim to despise. Despite this inertia, society contains enormous potential energy. Crisis, pandemics, geopolitical shifts, technological upheavals demonstrate that rapid change is possible. Systems can bend quickly when sufficiently stressed. The unresolved question is sustainability. Revolutions can erupt, transformations are harder to maintain, energy can be released in bursts, but institutionalization requires patience, discipline, and competence. Potential alone is not enough. Without skilled political actors, organizers rather than marketers, builders rather than performers, energy dissipates into spectacle. The missing driver. The recurring failure is not the absence of opportunity, but the absence of capable stewards. Charisma substitutes for craft. Branding replaces strategy. Politics become performative rather than navigation. Transformative change demands political animals, figures fluent in power, institutions, timing, and sacrifice. Without them, even favorable conditions are squandered. Until such figures emerge, the cycle will repeat: disruption, exhaustion, restoration, each turn further eroding belief that anything else is possible. America's historical advantage lay not in its heroic struggle, but in abundance, open land, resources, and post-war dominance. Its political psychology was shaped by expansion rather than survival. This produced a population accustomed to optionality, retreat, sacrifice, and enclosure, feel alien in a society formed by openness. Efforts to impose austerity of spirit clash with inherited expectations. The frontier did not teach discipline, it taught exit. That lesson still governs behavior. Radical change is possible but fragile. It requires precision, legitimacy, and endurance. Without these, attempts at transformation did not merely fail, they inoculated society against future efforts. The tragedy is not that the dream collapses, but that its collapse convinces observers it was foolish to dream at all. The final axiom remains unresolved: whether the window for transformation is closing or whether it waits dormant until someone capable of opening it appears. That is the end of part 1, The Accelerationist Freeze of Nick Fuentes. I'll see you guys later.